to introduce the second speaker for the day. I hope I'm audible. I'm audible.
Yeah, perfectly. Yes, yes.
Um, uh, Hemant Rajopadhye is a scholar of Sanskrit, ancient Indian history, South Asian religions with proficiency in Marathi, English, Hindi, and German languages. He wrote the dissertation on the theme of Rekindling the Sacred, History of Modern Dattātreya Saṃpradāya in the Marathi speaking public sphere at the University of Göttingen. He's yet to defend his thesis. His research focuses on what the subcontinent's socio-political and cultural history and traditions offer to understand the solutions to today's local, national, and subcontinental problems in the context of politics, interfaith harmony, pluralism, social justice, cultural, religious, and linguistic conflicts. He has held various teaching positions at Flame University, University of Ahmedabad, Mumbai University, and currently Mumbai University at present, and the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Göttingen from September 2015 to January 2016. He is also a member of the Maharashtra Rajya Marathi Vishwakosh Nirmiti Mahamandal, which is in English translated as Maharashtra State Marathi Encyclopedia Committee, Government of Maharashtra, and has been a former head and senior fellow at the Center for the Study of Indian Knowledge Traditions at the Observer Research Foundation, the prominent public policy think tank. For almost 2 years, Hemant has also written fortnightly columns for the Lok Satta Marathi Daily Indian Express group. Thank you so much for joining us today, Hemant. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Kavya. At the very outset, I thank my dear friend Professor Antonio Rigopoulos. It is an honor to be with him, and I must begin my talk by saying that life comes a full circle. I remember myself sitting in the library of Bhandarkar Institute. That was in 207-8. The guy who just had finished his BA and was looking forward to start working on the concept of guru for his doctoral research. And accidentally, I came across the beautiful monograph by Professor Rigopoulos at the library of Bhandarkar Institute. That was just fresh copy that they have received, and I grabbed it from the hands of the librarian. And then I bought my own copy, which was very expensive back then. But I was so impressed by Professor Rigopoulos' book. And again, I mean, I also fondly remember he generously invited me to deliver a talk at his institute. That was in 2014, I guess. And then I wrote my dissertation, which is I'm yet to defend for many technical complexities. I have not been able to defend it, but yeah, I mean, Professor Rigopoulos has been my inspiration and mentor in terms of my, conducting my research on Dattatreya. I will follow the same pattern that Professor Rigopoulos has, set. Let me begin with my, interest in Dattatreya and Dattātreya Saṃpradāya. I hail from a family of Dattatreya worshippers. My native place is Akkalkot, as Professor Rigopoulos mentioned about Akkalkot Maharaj. I mean, I identify myself as a participant observer, as they call in anthropological terms. So I'm a believer myself, and I also look at it in a critical way possible. But now that Professor Rigopoulos has elaboratively put forward the very idea of what Dattatreya is, what Dattatreya Saṃpradāya is, I am going to kind of conduct a survey of what I mean, the survey that anchors at the very notion of Dattatreya, but it has to do with a broader socio-political picture of Maharashtra or Marathi-speaking public sphere in different times. And then also Himanshu has requested me to, you know, speak briefly about Nimade, Bhalchandra Nimade, the widely discussed Marathi author, and his Deshivad. So I have to anchor that again in the context of Mahanubhava and Vegli Dattatreya. So yeah, I mean, during the time when yourself, especially in India, is identified with the political ideology, it is important to understand whether things about the individual self have ever been your ideologies, ritual practices, your pantheistic affiliation, and it is important to understand the changing paradigms of Hindu public sphere uh, before the advent of Islam in the Deccan. So Dattatreya, exactly as Professor Rigopoulos has mentioned, he he enters the Maharashtrian religious milieu around 11th century with the uh, arrival of Nathas, as he mentioned in his monograph. Uh, well, my camera is already switched on. Can't. Okay, I'm
I'm
sorry.
not saying to you. Yeah, please continue. The others.
I'm sorry. So and then Dattatreya, we see that Dattatreya is there across every Marathi religious sampradaya, every Marathi religious pantha, as they say. We have Dattatreya in Natha Sampradaya, of course. He's a kind of promulgator of Natha tradition, as per many sub traditions in Natha Sampradaya. He's the one who has initiated Chakradhara and his Paramaguru Changadev Rao. He's the Chakradhara mentions that Ya Margasi Sri Dattatreya Prabhu Adi Karana. So he is the main reason behind the inception of this sampradaya. Then Dattatreya appears in Ramadasi Pantha. He appears before Ramadasa in a guise of Muslim saint. Before that, he gives darshan to Eknath in a guise of Muslim Mahanta, Muslim uh, uh, Sufi ascetic. Well, there are different Dattatreya, as Professor Antonio Rigopoulos has mentioned. I am going to anchor these ideas in the broader spectrum of Marathi religiosity, as I mentioned. Now, what happens with Mahanubhava is, and well, I mean, we have to look at the concept of Maharashtrian self in different period. So when one says Maharashtrian self, and when one speaks of self, we need to understand that uh, Marathis are the one of those nationalist groups in what we call India today, and they flaunt their patriotism and nationalism, which is anchored in what they imagine as Maharashtra Dharma. And Maharashtra Dharma is one of the most important concept that is bestowed upon us by Guru Charitra, that is referred by Professor Rigopoulos. And this concept of Maharashtra Dharma appears before us in different forms. For example, Mahikavati Chi Bakhar, the Bakhar about uh, the area surrounding Mumbai, Mahim, Virar, Vasai, Thane. So that particular the history of that particular pocket of Western India is depicted in that Bakhar, which is composed in early 15th century by Keshavacharya. And there we see the reference of Dattatreya. We also see that Keshavacharya assertively mentions that Maharashtra Dharma is all about practicing your native religious, religious rituals and practices. Then we have Maharashtra Dharma appearing in Guru Charitra, wherein the hero of Guru Charitra, Nrsimha Saraswati Swami, he engages with one of his devotees, who happens to be a king of Bidar or Vaidura Nagari. Whether it is Bidar or Bidar or some other city, it is contested. But the king, Muslim king, and he compels him, or he advises him to follow Maharashtra Dharma. Maharashtra Dharma Vartave, as he says. And he then, according to Guru Charitra, Maharashtra Dharma here means not to kill cows, respect Brahmins, not to convert them forcibly, etc., etc. So the concept of Maharashtra Dharma again appears before us through the writings of Ramadas Swami, Samartha Ramdas, who is widely remembered as nationalistic figure and guru of some Marathi heroes. So he depicts that, he tells us that Maratha Tituka Mera Baba, one should unite, Marathas should get united, and Maharashtra Dharma Vada Baba. So the output of it is expansion of Maharashtra Dharma, what he imagines as Maharashtra Dharma. So basically, this Maharashtra Dharma is all about egalitarian. It is anchored in that egalitarian idea. Uh, Professor Prachi Deshpande identifies the Maharashtra Dharma as generalized Maharashtrian moral order reflective of an equally generalized Maratha patriotism nurtured by an egalitarian bhakti atmosphere and religious cohesion applied or customized in different contexts. Well, I mean, we also have to keep in mind that this particular idea of Maharashtra Dharma is it's celebrated or flaunted by many important Marathi scholars, despite their unanimity. I mean, despite their differences over the notion of or the characteristics of Maharashtra Dharma. But so I mean, the father of Marathi historiography, as they call him, Professor Shri V.K. Rajwade. So he comes up with a formula about what is Maharashtra Dharma according to him, and that comprises Hinduism, broader Hinduism in other parts of India. We have to keep in mind that Mahikavatichi Bakar is all about the rise of some certain royal families in that particular Mumbai, what is MMRDA today, frankly, Mumbai metropolitan region. So Rajwade tells us that many of these North Indian families have relocated and they have started their the small kingdoms in this part of the Western India. And Keshavacharya, as it is quoted by Rajwade, he so while summarizing Keshavacharya's ideas about Maharashtra Dharma, Rajwade gives us a formula that Hinduism in other parts of India, which is coming in this pocket of this part of Western India, plus establishment of righteous rule, what they imagine as righteous rule, which is Dharma Rajya, which comprises protection of cows and Brahmins. Then again, Rajwade comes to his own contemporary times and adds one more thing, which is freedom, unity, and leadership, which is, of course, Brahmanical leadership in terms of intellectualism and Kshatriya leadership, as he imagines in that particular context. So that is what Maharashtra Dharma is. And the figure of Dattatreya is important in this context. Not only figure of Dattatreya, also all these Mahanubhava gurus, precisely Chakradhara especially, and Gundam Rahul, that is Govinda Prabhu. I mean, again, an important figure because we have to contextualize it in the context of broader what is vaguely known as Dattātreya Saṃpradāya. I call it vaguely vaguely imagined because again the term Sampradaya is as depicted by many scholars such as Angelica Malinar. Sampradaya has to have some unique, some single founder or a group of founders. There should be one particular Haupt Urtext, the original text. Probably when Dr. Dhere or even Rigopoulos refers to Dattātreya Saṃpradāya, they may be referring to Guru Charitra tradition, probably, because it has one singular Bible, that is Guru Charitra, and then respective other subsequent texts written in 20th century are affiliated to that tradition. Otherwise, Dattātreya Saṃpradāya is not a monolithic entity. It is a very heterogeneous group of Dattātreya worshippers across different disciplines. For example, Mahanubhavas, who are against Vedic ritualism and Vedic Brahminical hierarchy. We have Natha Sampradaya, we have Natha ascetics who are again not who are not in favor of Brahminical hierarchy. Then we have Guru Charita tradition, wherein Brahminical hierarchy, Brahminical supremacy is at the helm. Then we have 20th century traditions led by antinomian ascetics such as Akkalkot Swami Samartha, Akkalkot Maharaj, or Sai Baba, or even now there are uh, many modern ascetics who are identified as Dattātreya Saṃpradāya, such as Gajanan Maharaj of Shegao or Shankar Maharaj, who died in Pune. So they are also now considered as Dattātreya avatars. So again, I mean, avatara, as mentioned by Professor Rigopoulos, Dattātreya is considered by Puranas as avatara of Vishnu. And now, perhaps he is the only god in Hindi, in broader Hindu pantheon, that the avatar has avatar. Probably Bhairava sometimes is remembered as Shiva's avatar or Shiva's manifestation. But here we have a god who himself is an avatar of Lord Vishnu, and now he has some 10s or 15s of avatars coming up. And even now, there are, I mean, contemporary saints who are revered by their respective followers as avatar of Dattatreya. Or now we also have some avatars, some people who are identified as avatar of Swami Samartha or avatar of Nrsimha Saraswati in contemporary Maharashtra. So that is a typical characteristic of Dattatreya Sampradaya. And this happens because uh, of that extreme pluralism, pluralism of extreme level that we have in India or in subcontinent. And the second reason I believe behind this is, uh, in a country of extreme paradoxes, we need gods who have paradoxical nature, and Dattatreya fits in that particular framework. That is why Dattatreya is, he is enjoying lots of popularity in contemporary Maharashtra, in some pockets of Gujarat, Karnataka, and now we have many Parsi and we already had many Parsi devotees. For example, Meher Baba, one of the widely venerated saints, who himself was a Parsi, is sometimes affiliated, or he himself has identified himself as associated with Dattatreya Sampradaya. So we had reference of many Parsi devotees of Dattatreya or respective avatars of Dattatreya. We have, as rightly mentioned by Professor Rigopoulos, we have Muslim manifestations of Dattatreya. And all these things, for example, this reminds me of a very conspicuous yet unnoticed, not so famous Muslim Marathi saint called Shahamuni. So Shahamuni is uh, he he's closely associated with Mahanubhavas. Many of Mahanubhavas still follow him, and I don't remember exact quote, but he is the one who uh, claims, perhaps, I mean, he's a Muslim saint, and uh, he says that uh, the Avindhas, that is the Muslims, the word Avindha is used by Sheikh Muhammad, again the important figure, Sheikh Muhammad. Sheikh Muhammad is Sheikh Muhammad is one of, well, I won't call him Sufi, because he comes up with, a philosophy that is closer to Advait Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism. His father was a Guru Bandhu of Chand Bodle, who was a guru of Janardhan Swami, the guru of Eknath. Uh, Nowadays, again, he is also identified as Dattatreya's avatar by many. So Dattatreya has these particular characteristics to bring all these different um, uh, paradoxes under single umbrella, and uh, make people flaunt of it. So Shahamuni, what Shahamuni tells us, that Avindhas, that is the Muslims, uh, are against Maharashtra Dharma. Some Avindhas are against Maharashtra Dharma, and some Avindhas like me, we are following Maharashtra Dharma, and some Hindus are also against Maharashtra Dharma, while some of them are following Maharashtra Dharma. So this particular concept of Maharashtra Dharma, which is derived from Guru Charitra, or or Mahikawati Ji Bakar, is the concept that that uh, that manifests the uh, liberal or well, I'm afraid of using these terms these days because they have different meanings in modern context. But 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 you know, I don't remember the word, so I use the word liberal. But perhaps Maharashtra Dharma can be used. I mean, is often used throughout the tradition. To refer to certain framework, which is, of course, which is Brahmanical uh, to a larger extent, but it makes people come together and live together. It tells us the importance of coexistence. Now, this brings me to the concept of Maharashtrian self, which is again which that begins from what uh, we have been discussing so far, Mahanubhavas. Now, uh, most of us know that Mahanubhavas they don't believe in any god, and they just revere these five Krishnas: Shri Krishna, Shri Dattātreya, Shri Chakrapani, that is Sangdev Rahul, Shri Govinda Prabhu, Gundam Rahul, and अपना Chakradhar Swami. Now, what happens with generally even the lay Mahanubhava believes that Chakradhara is manifestation, or Chakrapani, Sangdev Rahul, when he left his mortal body, his soul entered the body of the deceased son of the Prime Minister of Bharuch, or according to some traditions, he's a son of Prime Minister of Kambat. So Chakradhara essentially is a Gujarati guy, Gujarati man. Now, what Mahanubhava tradition tells us about it, it is very interesting. The Vaideshkar part of Leela Charitra tells us, I quote, Gosavi Sakala Avatara Vyavrutile. So Gosavi, that is Chakradhara, he has encompassed he's present in all these avatars. Tyat Dwaravati Karahi Vyavrutile. He is also uh, you know manifests himself in a form of Dwaravatikara, which is perhaps Krishna, or Dwaravatikara. The term is also used for Chakrapani, that is Sangdev Rao, who lived there in Dwaravati for a long time. Maga Mahadaisi Prashna Kela, then Mahadaisa, one of his prominent disciples, female disciples, asks, Te Dwaravatikara, Tesa Amase Gosavi Asati. So the Dwaravatikara, that is Sangdev Rao, is it the same person that you are? Ata Gosavi Dwaravati Karachi Vyavruti Kijataye. So Gosavi, that is Chakradhara, explains his manifestation as himself and his manifestation as Dwaravati Kara. Yavari Gosavi Mahadaisa Prati Apanaya Ani Dwaravati Kara Bhinnata Nirupali. So he mentions that no, I am not Dwaravati Kara. He is a different figure and I am a different figure. Now, this contradiction in terms of self as depicted by the hagiographers of Chakradhara gives us some interesting puts some interesting details before us. Now, the idea of self about these figures that we get from different texts is, of course, not their own notion about their own self. It is the notion of their own self by put forward by their disciples. Now, some traditions believe that Sangdev Rao himself is Chakradhara, whereas according to Vaideshkar part, Chakradhara does not identify himself as Chakrapani or Sangdev. And then he further, the Vaideshkar part tells us that, Sangdev Rahul once went to Badrikashrama, Badrinath, and there he sees Chakradhara. So Chakradhara is already present before the birth of, or before Sangdev Rahul went to Himalayas. So for now what we get to know is Mahanubhavas, they vaguely mention their, Govinda Prabhu, we have the biography of Govinda Prabhu available, but we do not have detailed hagiography or biography of Chakrapani or Chakradhara available. So whatever Mahanubhava we have, Mahanubhava literary body we have, is about Chakradhara predominantly. So Chakradhara mentions that, according to Vaideshkar part, that I was already there when Sangdeva Rao visited that particular cave in Himalaya. Now this is, this tells us why we have so much heterogeneity in these kinds of religious sects. Thoda, I mean, let's jump in 20th century or 21st century for that matter. Akkalkot Maharaj, who is identified as uh, avatar of Dattatreya. Many scholars, of course, Professor Rigopoulos and even Anne Feldhaus, Professor Dhere, they have assertively mentioned that the hagiography of Govinda Prabhu reminds us of, sorry, the hagiography of Akkalkot Swami reminds us of Govinda Prabhu. Again, because they are the same antinomian, eccentric goblin-like figures, indulged in weird practices, obscure practices. Now, here, the same pattern is followed by the traditions which are vaguely associated with Dattātreya Saṃpradāya. The memories about Akkalkot Maharaj nowadays, those are coming up in last decade. That Akkalkot Swami is not avatar of Dattatreya. He's already there. He was born in 4th or 5th century AD. The recent traditional notion about him is that, and he was wandering across the subcontinent in different uh, forms, and then he said to have met Sripada Sri Vallabha much before Guru Charitra was composed. He is also said to have met Peshwas. He is also said to have met many of other ascetics of his times. So, just like Vaideshkar believed that Chakradhara was, he had some eternal form. He's already there, just as Dattatreya is always there, already there. Same is the case that is put forward by the modern devotees of Swami Samartha, that Swami Samartha is already there since last millennium. So this particular pattern is visible throughout these heterogeneous sects affiliated with Dattatreya or identified with Dattatreya. No, I refer to this because the idea of self is very complex in Marathi religiosity, and the idea of self that is depicted by the hagiographers, the idea of self of that particular figure, the heroes of respective hagiographies, is quite different than what it is understood. Now, these contours on which these two important and then we know that Chakradhara or Mahanubhavas are their immediate their immediate distant colleagues are Varkaris. I will not use the word Varkari because the word Varkari should not be applied, or should not, it doesn't make to use it for Dhaneshwar and his contemporaries, because Vari was started in 16th, 17th century. So Dhaneshwara, who again is flourished in the same time, he refers to Ramadev Yadav, who was the Yadava king, and who said to have punished Chakradhara, or at some point some traditions also believe that Chakradhara was killed allegedly by the Yadavas with the order by Himadri Panta. So Dhaneshwara and Chakradhara are the two important heroes we have. Those were flourished in 13th century, and they kind of build the foundation of what is called. It is not Maharashtra Dharma. It is some sort of Protestantism, maybe, if I may call it, that appears on the spectrum of Marathi religiosity. Now, this political movement can be looked upon with a discussion about these two particular sense, Chakradhara and Dhaneshwar, and then we will come down to Dattatreya again, and then I will conclude with what happens with this Deshivada, and how Dattatreya and Mahanubhavas are, I mean, they are to be looked at in this through this lens. Um, we know that Jnaneshwara or Gyaneshwara, he wrote the commentary on Bhagavad Gita, the first commentary on Mahabharata or any Sanskrit text in any regional language in India. And he does that because Gita should be accessed by those who do not have right to read or learn Sanskrit, especially the female across all castes and the Shudras. Now, there is a subtle difference between these two traditions. Um, for example, uh, I'm trying to verbalize it. Uh, uh, if it is seen, for example, there's some uh, uh, just a minute, please. Please allow me to refer to my notes. Huh. So yeah, so we can see these two different important leaders with a significant but yet subtle difference. Uh, for example, if one thinks of Chakradhara, he is a man who is born in affluent family, who is the son of one of the prominent commanders or one of the prominent states, son of a prime minister of one of the prominent states in Gujarat, who has enjoyed all the sensuous pleasures and then renunciated. He and well, scholars of Mahanubhava Sampradaya also have showed that there is some pre-existing animosity between the Yadavas and the Gurjaras and Parmaras from Gujarat. So that is there, of course. But here is a man who is renunciated, uh, embarked upon a new path. Rather, he's the one who's created this path with the blessing of Dattatreya. So he goes against the king Ramadeva, and he kind of attracts fury by his minister Himarpanta and the Ramdev himself. The legend tells us that he was once beheaded by the Yadavas, and then miraculously his head was again rejoined and he was revived. Um, then we have Jnaneshwar, who a little junior to uh, Chakradhara, but in his colophon to Jnaneshwari, he shows his uh, obeisance to the king Ramadeva. Now, let me go back to the concept of Maharashtra Dharma. Now, what Chakradhara does here is to uh, disobey or to protest against the Brahminical hierarchy and ritualism. Well, he comes up with his own ritualism and own laws, own rules, but then he does not follow Brahminical supremacy. However, Jnaneshwara, he pays obeisance to his king, while he tells his listeners, he tells his audience or followers to go against the very to go beyond the very notion of Brahmanism, to go beyond the orthodoxy of Brahmanism and understand the whatever Vedanta or Shaivism or uh, whatever name we give to that sphere of philosophy. As I mean, this reminds me of I'll go to the notes again. So this reminds me of an observation by Christian Nowitzki in his Quotidian Revolution, one of the uh, finest books. Immanuel Kant, after some 1500 years after Jnanadev, will speak into the emergent public sphere of Prussia in his response to the question of what is enlightened, and he exhorts his reader to dare to think, but also to obey. Now, here is similarly Naneshwara, some 500 years before Immanuel Kant, challenges his listeners to dare to think beyond the orthodoxies of Brahmanical acumen, and even of normal everyday life. Yet his obeisance to Ramachandra Raya, like Kant's to Frederick the Great, also remains uh, uh, evident uh, in the structure of social and political order. Like Kant, Jnanadeva seems to say that one must press uh, at the boundaries of thoughts. One must press the boundaries of thoughts, but remain within the uh, within the framework of normal social order. So here, Chakradhara tries to build a new order, new religious order, maybe, uh, and Jnaneshwara tells us, no, let us. You should praise your borders. You should come out of the comfort zone. And you should rebel against the oppressive traditions, but you should not break the social order that is set by these big powers such as Yadavas or any monarchic power, so to say. So Maharashtra, the concept of Maharashtra Dharma lies there. It tries to maintain so the moral or ethical framework of society or religion that is expected in this particular notion of Maharashtra Dharma is very much Vedic or Brahmanical, or maybe Puranic for that matter, if one traces the border of it. But then it has to be syncretic in nature, that the Muslims should mingle with the Hindus. They should not forcibly convert the Brahmins, and they should respect cows, or they should not kill the cow. So the discourse of Maharashtra Dharma is broadly centered around their notion of Hindu Dharma, or their notion of what is ours and what is not ours, that is us versus them. For them, Muslim was the real the major enemy in that context. Now let us come to the modern times. Maharashtra Dharma, as it is, we know that many of the contemporary leaders are again trying to revive or redefine the concept of Maharashtra Dharma. For example, uh, many Marathi-centric political parties led by the aggressive leaders, they try to rebuild this notion of Maharashtra Dharma, wherein Hindu remains at the helm of it, at the center of it. However, they assertively mention that आम्ही शेंड्या जानव्यांचं हिंदुत्व मानत नाही. So they don't believe in the Hindutva that is anchored in Shendi, that is stuffed, the Shikha, and Zanva, that is sacred thread. So they want the new kind of Hindutva. The Hindutva that is envisioned by these people is uh, that lies at the intersection of what is called liberalism and the idea of Hindutva put forward by Savarkar. So the extension of Maharashtra Dharma has come to this extent in 20th century. Now, uh, this brings me to the last part of my. I still have time, right? Okay. So this brings to the last part of my talk, which is Nimade, Balachandra Nimade. I'm sure many of you have read about his widely discussed book Hindu Ek Samruddha Adgal. Hindu uh, uh,
He says kabad. जीवन जीने का समृद्ध कबाड़.
I am trying to find word for kabad in English so that Professor Rigopoulos may get to know it. It is unwanted stuff that we have in house. Uh, uh, so Hinduism is all about that rich, that content rich material that we have, but which is not
Maybe a
necessary.
storeroom. Maybe a garage or storeroom kind
Yeah,
of.
storeroom with unwanted things. I mean, they have their own values, but we don't need them as of now. That's what Argal means. So the name is Hindu Ek Samruddha Argal. The book was, he declared that he is going to write this book in, I guess, late 70s, and then he published it in 2004 or 5 or maybe 2001. I'm forgetting the date. Now, what happens with Deshivad? Nemade's idea about Deshivad, that appears to us before us through his Sangdev Chatushtaya, his Kosala, Bidhar, Zul, and Zarila, the four discussed. Widely means, discussed by the critics, literary critics, and His then comes Hindu, wherein he kind of tries to uh, uh, write the history of Hinduism in a novel form, and we have a protagonist called Khande Rao, who hails from Khandesh part of Maharashtra, which is dominated by Lewa Patils. Lewa Patils are the uh, distant offshoot of Lewa Patidars from Gujarat, few feudal agrarian warlords or feudal agrarian rich community. Nemade himself hails from the same family, same community, if I am not mistaken. And the Khanderao, when he comes to Deccan College to study archaeology, he comes up with his observations, and then he mentions that, I mean, the usual Foleyite anti-Brahmanical critique uh, is again refurbished maybe by Nemade. Interesting part of it is his grandmother is a Mahanubhav, and whatever form of Hinduism Khandera has learned from his grandmother or has observed from the practices that his grandmother follows, he has his own conception of Hindutva or Hinduism, and then he kind of finds the Puneite Brahmanical version of Hindutva or Hinduness or Hindu Dharma as very hierarchical and exploitative, etc., etc., etc. Now, what happens here in terms of Deshivada? Deshivada is I mean, it is not Indian concept. We have many anti-colonial or decolonizing movements flourishing across world. We have scholars like Engungi, who recently passed away from Kenya, uh, who, with his background of Mau revolution, uh, writes in English about the impact of the terrible impact of colonialism on African society. Then we have South American scholars such as uh, sorry, I got blank. I don't remember the name now as of now. But there are many such movements promoting decolonization. Nimade is one of the prominent Indian authors, and perhaps the most celebrated Marathi authors who comes up with this idea of Deshivad. Now, his Deshivad lies in the Bahujana element of uh, Bahujana belief system, which he or many the likes of his or many progressive leaders in Marathi religiosity believe that uh, is non-Vedic. Now, this binary Vedic and non-Vedic often comes to us through these contexts. For example, the progressive part of the progressive sphere often puts forward different legends from the hagiographies of Eknath or Jnaneshwara or many other saints, wherein they find it progressive in nature. For example, the darshan that Eknath had of Dattatreya, wherein Dattatreya, that is the Malanga, the Muslim Malanga, tells him to uh, milk a female dog and drink the milk along with the bhakri, the bread that he has. Then we have other stories about, for example, Ramadas, who is believed as uh, you know uh, have believed to have established a prototype of what we call Hindutva today by many, like Rajwades. So Dattatreya appears before him in a form of Malanga again, and then he also cuts a cow and some other animals and serves his family. As the legend tells us. So these such myths are put forward by the progressive people, or maybe the semi-liberal sphere, maybe, that see, we have this liberal element in Hinduism. So Dattatreya is often used, or probably uh, uh, you know not Dattatreya as such, but Chakradhara or Mahanubhavas or Natha Sampradaya is often presented to us as a face of liberal Hinduism in modern times. Now, there lies the problem with this notion of what is called liberal Hinduism. Exactly, that is what is the subject matter of Nemade's Hindu, or his idea of what he calls Deshivad. Now, Nimade is, in terms of his linguistic abilities, perhaps Nimade is one of the finest writers and authors in Marathi literary sphere. His that it is that Hindu is uh, a kind of narration by this Khande Rao. It is a narration of his own understanding of of Hinduism, which is, according to him, anchored in the agrarian rural systems. And then he comes up with different ideas about whether there is a single Hindu dharma, or all these typical ideas. And he tries to associate that Hindu dharma with the Indus culture, with the Indus Mohenjo-daro and Harappan culture. And he exhibits his hatred would be a harsh word, but his unpleasant attitude, not so pleasant approach towards Vedic Brahmins. And then he says ki these drunkards and misbehaving, the words that he uses, daruda, vyabhichari and zugari, all these Brahmins, they should be thrown out of the subcontinent. And the Prithvi, well, we know the notion of Nikshatriya Prithvi that is attributed to Parshuram, who has killed all the Kshatriyas 21 times. So Khande Rao tells us ki there's need to nirbrahmana the Prithvi. We should nirbrahmana the Prithvi. So these ideas are coming up through his narration of what he imagines as Hindutva, as Hindu dharma. Then again, the notion of Ashprushas, how Ashprushas are they are relocating to cities. How the Panchama Varna, the way he depicts Panchama Varna, all these things that appear through this particular narration, it is definitely, it represents certain non-Brahmanical ideas, but these non-Brahmanical ideas are again anchored in some sort of converse of what is imagined as Brahmanism by this particular Khande Rao, that is the hero of Nimade. Now, the problem with current progressive discourse in Maharashtra or in India is that, especially I want to be a little political. I hope there will not be any problem. I am not criticizing or making personal comment on any political party, but just to be more precise, or to make it more clear, with the advent of Hindu right wing in the second decade of 21st century, now the progressive Marathi progressive sphere is fighting to come to terms with what they imagine as Hindutva, or what they imagine as Hindu dharma, and what they try to fetch out of, or to get out of that Hindu dharma, which is liberal according to them. So now the attempt is going on to promote the writings of Vinoba Bhave, or Sane Guruji, or Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, or Gandhi's idea of secular liberal Hinduism, etc., etc. Now, what happens with the nativism is, the nativism that Nimade depicts is a kind of personal nativism that perhaps that comes out of Nimade's own imagination. I personally believe that the concept of Deshivada is should be decentralized, and it should be individualistic. For my own Deshiness, or not only Deshiness, my own imagination about Dharma or Dattātreya or any Sampradāya, or my affiliation with any sect, or me being a believer or non-believer, should be individualistic. What happens here is, perhaps the progressive cultural milieu has maybe after 1960s, they have neglected this open-minded, or maybe liberal, or such elements in Hinduism. For example, Mahanubhavas are often depicted as anti-Brahmanical. But the idea of being Brahmanical, or what is Brahmanical, in itself is contradictory to what is imagined as being Brahmanical. So, for example, the Buddhists, for example, the neo Buddhists who uh, who worship Hindu gods are banished or they are outcasted by the new Buddhist communities. Same goes with, it is exactly the mirror image of Brahmanism, rather, I would say. So, uh, what the problem with Nemade's Deshivad is that uh, by taking the names of Mahanubhavas and other liberal traditions, and by putting his or by entwining his argument with the uh, with with the observations of early European observers of India, he kind of uh, creates tries to create certain non-Brahmanical version of Hinduism, which is native. And then his remarks also tell us that, for example, gods like Masoba or a very local, I mean, micro level, the locality of god called Shingroba. Now, Shingroba uh, is he was a shepherd. We have his temple in the Bor Ghat, that is the ghat where we have express Mumbai Pune Express Highway now. So the shepherd who showed the way towards Mumbai to the Britishers, he was killed by the Britishers, and now we have his temple. He is worshipped as God there. So Nemade once gave his remark that uh, people who used to bow down before this particular Shingroba, they may not, I mean, they won't face or they would not face any accident. That is the power of Deshivad, as he tries to, put forward. Now, to be a believer and to be a believer in a particular Brahmanical, non-Brahmanical, or Catholic, or Protestant, or any other frame is a different thing, and the political ideology is a different thing. Now, this, I mean, I know that I'm going away from the original theme of the talk, but Mahanubhavas, the anti-Brahminness or Brahmanetaratva, I mean, which is or otherness than Brahmins, or how can I verbalize it? I mean that Brahmanetara is the word usually used in Marathi, which is not anti-Brahmanism, but the otherness of Brahmins is highlighted through that word. So that Brahmanetaratva uh, is uh, is prevalent there in society, but Brahmanetaratva, well, what M.N. Srinivas mentions, what he calls uh, that Sanskritization. So Nemade's ideas about Deshivada, or Nemade's ideas about Deshi Hindu Dharma, which should be non-Vedic or non-Brahmanical, again seeks the same upwardly mobility, which leads to another form of Brahmanism, or maybe what can be called as the converse of Brahmanism. So many scholars, such as uh, Prachi Deshpande herself, or I forgot one Marathi scholar. His surname is Ingre, Dilip Ingre, or some Ingre. Devendra Ingre, Professor Devendra Ingre, who's a professor of history at Aurangabad, if I'm not wrong. They have shown these contradictions in the idea of what is called Deshivad by Nemade. Now, the Deshivad, which is supposedly non-Brahmanism or non-Brahmanical way of living of Hindus, it has not found any broader religious spectrum which has been untouched from Vedism or Brahmanism. Now, what happens with Varkari? It gets Brahmanized, or it gets Vaishnavized. What happens with Mahanubhavas? Now it gets, you know, not Brahmanized, but it has merged in the broader Hindu framework. And the recent developments tell us that they have unanimously supported the Hindutva parties. So ultimately, it may appropriate itself in the modern Hindu political framework. What happens with Dattātreya Saṃpradāya again? Well, the process starts in 16th century itself, but again, Dattātreya, using that Brahmanical element from his iconography or his imagery, again, the majority Dattatreya uh, uh, worshipping groups are, um, you know, trying to flaunt the orthodoxy which they which is inherent or which is not inherent in certain practices. For example, the tradition of Akkalkot Sampradaya. I have extensively written that in my thesis, that here is a that Akkalkot Sampradaya, or Sai Baba for that matter. Sai Baba, he has a disciple called Das Ganu, and Das Ganu, his disciples are
So,
now. Yeah, I
sorry to
still have
disturb,
5
but
minutes.
can we wrap up in a few minutes? Then we can have
Yeah,
discussion.
I will do that. I will
Yes.
do that.
Thanks.
So what happens with Deshivada? I mean, with the advent of Deshivada, we need to look at Deshivada and we need to look at these traditions, these so-called liberal or non-Vedic or semi-Vedic traditions of Dattatreya worshippers or Mahanubhavas. That ultimately, the Deshivada or the nativism tries to find some political space in contemporary religious or communal politics. So, Deshivada, which is entwined with patriotism or nationalism, or and that lies on at the intersection of religious belief systems and contemporary political ideas, should be reconsidered again in the light of what these semi-Brahmanical or semi-Puranic traditions have been putting forward before us. Now, I personally believe this may sound a bit emotional. To conclude, this is my final remark, that perhaps Natha Sampradaya, or some certain notions of Mahanubhavas, or certain ideas or certain practices from Dattatreya Sampradaya can be presented or put forward as the framework that suits the discourse of liberal or progressive Hinduism. So, with the kaleidoscopic nature of Dattatreya, the term I borrowed from Professor Rigopoulos' book. So the kaleidoscopic nature of Dattatreya and these traditions of Mahanubhavas and so-called Datta Sampradayas can represent the heterogeneity and uh, paradoxes that lie within the broader Hindu or uh, South Asian religious frameworks. And these frameworks, these heterogeneity often reflects through the Indian version of or South Asian version of Islam and Christianity. So probably the values that are put forward before us by these Nath and Dattatreya traditions can play a vital role in probably creating a sustainable model of, again, I don't want to use this word liberal, but I don't remember any other word. So liberal form of Hinduism. I conclude. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And now I think, without further delay, we can start discussing things. And people can switch on the
Also,
video camera.
before you begin, I just want to intervene for a minute, if I may. Uh, uh, it is an absolute honor to speak before Professor Rigopoulos. I have borrowed so many ideas from his writings, and I would like to have his comments first. Whether I mean I, uh, spoke sense or not. So, if I may request Professor Rigopoulos, it will be an honor to.
Well,
Yeah, please.
thank you so much, Hemant. I really enjoyed your talk, and I basically agree with you. It is not possible to fit in a kind of dualistic opposition, Brahmanical, anti-Brahmanical, liberal versus conservative, the Datta Sampradaya, or Dattatreya himself, or the Manubhavs, because they are more complex than any kind of dualistic opposition might lead us to think. And I'll give you three examples of this complexity. Within so-called Hinduism, there is no question that the bhakti component that was so prominent in Jnana Dev at the origin of the Jnaneshwari and then the Varkari, played a fundamental role in reshaping even Brahmanism. So, as you were saying, Jnana Dev, a way of looking at Brahmanism through bhakti, was a major departure from the more ritual smarta Brahmanism of the past. And yet he was also a Brahmin. So, I mean, even the Bhakti prominence of the Varkari tradition later on testifies to the fact that Maharashtra Dharma is much more complex and articulated and itself integrative than trying to fit it in a binary way of thinking black or white, white or black. So it's more complex than that. Also, a second example, I think that the genius of the Dattatreya deity and movement is best understood if we think of the Avaduta. That is, Datta is the paradigm of the Avadut. And Avadut is not against Dharma, but is in a way beyond Dharma, in the sense that he is Dharma in and of itself. He is a rule unto himself. And so he can very freely both follow the Varnashrama Dharma, but also eventually, in his freedom, reject it or highlight new ways of or new dharmas that are more important at that particular moment or that particular time. And I think, again, this resonates with bhakti or devotionalism in the sense that in many instances of the saints of the Datta Saṃpradāya or Dattatreya himself, what matters most is pure love, is prema, is bhakti. So that in a way, that becomes the highest dharma. Like Lord Krishna tells Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita in the last chapter, in chapter 18, when he tells him that if he can love, if he can live at the highest bhakti, then he can simply disregard all dharmas, and he will still be a good Hindu and a true devotee of Krishna. So I think that in Dattatreya you have this combination of Avaduta, which in a way is a way to express the freedom of the person, so that that's precisely the reason why Dattatreya is always unpredictable, because certain times he is the most staunch orthodox Brahmin in certain cases, in certain circumstances, and in other cases he appears as very liberal, or he appears as anti-Brahmanism. But it is not that he is anti anything. It's rather that his set of values is different. That the highest value is always brotherhood and love towards the divine and love towards all the fellow beings. And a third example that comes to my mind, you mentioned in passing Shirdi Sai Baba and Das Ganu. I'm reminded of, because I've been working on this, I've just finished a big work on the Shirdi diary of Ganesh Shri Krishna Kaparde,
Oh, wow.
who was a major politician who was allied with Tilak. And he wrote a wonderful Shirdi diary of his presence at Shirdi.
Right.
And I just finished writing a commentary to it. Well, what is
Wow.
interesting here is that Kaparde was a Maharashtrian Brahmin. He was absolutely, a nationalist and on the side of Bal Gangadhar Tilak. He was his right arm of Tilak, Kaparde. And still, he was never communal in his approach. He was never anti-Islam or anti-Muslim. He was a devotee of Gajanan Maharaj, but then he became a devotee of Shirdi Sai Baba, who was a fakir. But never for a minute Kaparde ever thought of Shirdi Sai Baba as a Muslim. He thought of Shirdi Sai Baba as the manifestation of Brahman, of the Absolute. And for him, Shirdi Sai was Dattatreya himself. So that, you see, this allows us to rethink about even political issues in a more complex way. And even the Maharashtra Dharma in a more complex way. It is too simple or too naive to think of a polarity of white or black, of Brahmanical or anti-Brahmanical. Things are much more richer and much more complex than this. And if you look at the life of a person like Ganesh Sri Krishna Kaparde, who was a very, very staunch Brahmin and fighter for freedom along Tilak's ideas, still, his God was Sai Baba of Shirdi, who was a fakir, but he never thought in his mind of Shirdi Sai as something opposite to his ideals, because he was never communal in his outlook from the beginning. And also Tilak was never communal in his attitude toward the Muslim League or toward the Muslim minority in India. I mean, these are oversimplifications that have been done later. But actually, if you look at the lives of these people, they were not communal in the least. At least in the case of Kaparde, I can say 100% that this is the case. So I think we need to become more, to become more sophisticated and see at things with more nuances and see the complexity of the texture of all the issues involved, and leave aside two simplistic ways of dealing with these issues, like Brahmanical, anti-Brahmanical, liberal, or conservative, because I don't think they really work, or they are really helpful to understand what was Hinduism or religion all about in the medieval Deccan, or even nowadays in modern and contemporary Maharashtra.
Absolutely. I'm very thankful to you for your comment, and I'm very excited to know that you are working on Khaparde.
I've just finished. I've sent my draft for the publication. Now it's going under peer review, so I hope it will be coming out either by the end of the year or by the beginning of 2026. It is basically a study, a thorough commentary on Shirdi Sai Baba's on Kaparde's Shirdi diary, and especially focusing on the tales and parables of Sai Baba himself. But because Sai Baba used to tell very short stories, gosht, that he never cared to explain. And so, since these have never been commented or interpreted, I'm giving it a try and trying to comment upon them and trying to see what they really meant, what they actually meant. And I try to contextualize all this within the political and cultural milieu of those days, of those years, because, as you know, Kaparde was he was a political person, and he was totally involved in the freedom, in the national freedom politics, and at the same time, he was a very, very religious man who was very much devoted to first Gajanan Maharaj and then Shirdi Sai Baba, because actually Gajanan Maharaj himself directed Kaparde and his wife after his leaving the body to go to Shirdi.
Right. I would like to discuss it with you personally, because I recently visited Khaparde's home in Amravati, and I met him
really?
recently. Yeah. And
I wanted to go meet them, but I could not go this year because my wife was not too well, and I had planned to go to India and to visit Amravati and the Kaparde descendants, but it was impossible for me because I had to stay home. Now my wife is better, and so I hope to go to India, as I told you, next year. But in the meantime, I finished my work on the text, and so I decided to close it up. But a lot can be done on these issues, and on Kaparde is a wonderful figure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you.
I think there can be more questions and comments we can take. from audience? Yeah, please switch on your video if possible, and then we can have a discussion. Ashish, can you please speak if it's possible? Okay, so I'll read Ashish's question for that matter, and others also you can either write in chat box and or ask later. So Ashish says, what in your opinion might have been the reasons for the flourishing of the Varkaris compared to the Mahanubhavas? In the beginning, why did the Mahanubhavas face an attitude of disdain during the early stages? And what changed in the 16th century that led to their sudden rise? Can you please also address or tell us to whom is this question addressed? Or anyone can take, that's fine. So, Professor Rigopoulos or Hemant, maybe anyone of you can take.
Well, I can try to respond to this briefly. It is not an easy issue, but I think that the Mahanubhavs were very elitist, and the difference is basically that the Gyandev and even the later Varkaris were a lay movement, were open to all, and had a very, in a way, open attitude, with bhakti being prominent and asceticism being not prominent. Whereas the Manubhavs from the beginning are more like an ascetic group of monks and nuns. And so they are, from the very beginning, more elitist and thus less appealing to the large public, because they are especially thought of for not lay people, but for people who want to embrace a life of renunciation and asceticism. And so, of course, this makes them very different. And more than that, Chakradhara was clearly very, in a way, against some of the fundamental issues of Varnashrama Dharma. He was kind of very, very, let's say, against many of those Brahmanical patterns, whereas Jnandev was much more accommodating with them. I think it's also an issue that Jnandev was much more accommodating than Chakradhar was. Chakradhar tended to be kind of more radical in his approach, which I think was the main reason that led also the Manubhavs to a kind of fringe area and considered to be not orthodox from the beginning. And so practically the Manubhavs condemned themselves to a life of, in a way, seclusion, and had to be defensive throughout the centuries. And as I mentioned, it is very revealing, the fact that they had a hidden script in order to preserve their ideas and texts. And they came to be known only very recently, basically, and reevaluated only very recently, I would say in the 20th century, thanks to Indian scholarship that has understood the great value of the Manubhavs, both at a literary level and at a theological level, because of their creativity and they're very original in their way of thinking and also of imagining reality. So they have remained very elitist, and they are a very slim percentage, slim group, but they have been a very significant minority group. And I think study of the Manubhavs through a study of the old Marathi and their literature is most important in India today. And I think that this can best be done by Marathi scholars, because it is not easy to work on old Marathi, and you need a great expertise also on the language and on the scripts. Also, this Sakala Lipi, this hidden way of writing. So you really need an expertise that I think would be best developed by a native Indian Marathi contemporary scholar. But I think these are basically the major differences. Varkaris were always more popular and bhakti oriented, whereas Manubhavs were always elitist and prone to asceticism. They really thought of themselves as an ascetic group, basically of monks and nuns, and Chakradhara was more of a radical figure with respect to Jnandev, who was much more accommodating, I believe. But I mean, these are just few ideas.
Uh, I have some more things to add, if I may, with your permission, Tony. Uh, Another reason is, well, there are two reasons which are intertwined. One is the obscure behaviors that appears. I mean, obscure behavior of Chakradhara that comes to the surface because of their animosity with the Yadavas. Uh, for example, certain incidents such as he wanted, I guess, Mahadai, some female follower of disciple of him, he wanted to see her dancing naked, uh, which is, then there appears one more incident where he is said to have married one of his disciples, female disciples, which is just like, it is a representation, or maybe uh, it comes out of that antinomian element that he may have
Yeah,
inherited from,
the Avadut element. Yeah.
right, that he has inherited from his guru Govind Prabhu. But now, here you have already, you know ongoing problems with the dispensation, political dispensation, Himadri, who is against you. Not only that, you are also condemning the political ideas and systems put forward by Himadri, the ideas related to taxation, ideas related to trade.
And
uh,
also the opposition against his Chaturvarga Chintamani.
exactly. Also, this part, the first part that I mentioned, the obscurity of his behavior is highlighted within his lifetime by the Brahmanical leaders. That is why perhaps uh, post his, as they call Uttarapanthi Prayana, after his departure to the north, that is Himalayas, probably, or his demise, or maybe the end of his career, uh, Mahanubhavas were identified by the Brahmanical leadership as those who are misbehaviors, or those who do not follow social orders or ethics. That is why perhaps um, some some people who do not follow social orders, or don't follow Brahmanical or urban notion of civic sense, are often addressed as Manbhavis, or they are sometimes, the upper caste sensitivities also identify the word Manbhava with Mang Bhau. Mang is again a Dalit caste, and Mahanbhavas are identified with this word Mangabhav as a curse word. So all these notions should be considered, and that is perhaps the reason why, and Varkaris have maintained that sanitized, quote unquote ideal way of social religious practices.
Thank
That
you,
is
Hemant. I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you, and I think you are absolutely right.
Thanks for addressing the question. Do we have another question? Yes, Mika, please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for this lovely talk, both Professor Antonio and Hemant Rajopadhye. Um, my question is slightly varied from the Mahanubhava tradition. I was wondering, Professor Antonio, you gave us the historical background of Dattatreya and his influence in the Natha Sampradaya, as well as the Mahanubhava tradition. I was wondering how, from this one figure of Dattatreya, two very vastly different sets of knowledge could emerge, in the sense of the Natha Sampradaya, which led to Jnanadeva's commentary on the Gita, his Amritamurga, and all other contributions. And on the other hand, this Mahanubhava sect, which is, as you have said, completely anti-Brahminical in that sense. So, from this one figure of Dattatreya, could you explain the relation that this deity took in the Natha tradition a little bit more, if that's possible?
Thank you for your question, which is very complex. I will say three things. First thing, in my presentation, I mentioned the relation of Dattatreya with the Nath yogis as seminal, as foundational, as the fundamental issue. And I mentioned this work in Marathi by this scholar called Lonkar, and also this work of Véronique Bouillet on the Nath yogis as the most recent studies on the subject. But the truth is that I myself would like to know more on this relation of Dattatreya with the Nathism, especially the Western branch. But it is very difficult to reconstruct because we have very few testimonies, and thus it is not at all easy to understand how all this began or developed, because the testimonies we have, even the written testimonies in in the literature, like in the literature of the Mahanubhavs or of Sannyasa Upanishads, etc., are all kind of late because they are at least 13th century or from 13th century onwards. But really, what would be interesting to know is what happened between the 10th and the 12th, or the 10th and the 13th century, because I think that was the time when actually Dattatreya theology and all this relation of Datta with Nathism and yoga began. And that is very, very difficult and only tentative to reconstruct. Second point is to answer your question, how is it possible that from Dattatreya originate so very different groups, ideas, and behavior? Well, that has to do and can only be explained, I think, because Dattatreya is the catalyst of many different, even opposite perspectives and ideas. And he tended to assimilate and incorporate them. And this kind of assimilation and incorporation is a feature of Maharashtra Dharma, really, or of the Deccan religiosity, since very early times, and certainly in medieval times. And it has also a lot to do with the presence of Islam in the Deccan. So that I think really Dattatreya is a Brahmanical god that at the same time is beyond Brahmanical ideology per se. And this goes back to what I was saying about his Avaduta nature, yoga avadhuta or paramahamsa element, which makes Dattatreya a paradigm of freedom. Yes, I would classify it in this way. Please always remember that moksha means freedom, and Datta is the embodiment of freedom, even from Dharma Shastra, even from Varnashrama Dharma, not in the sense that he goes against it, but that he considers the possibility that in certain cases, in certain historical periods, given certain circumstances, what he gives priority to is not necessarily Brahmanical ideology or even ritualism, is something else, which has to do, I think, with bhakti, which becomes the most important element. And it is not perchance that Dattatreya is an avatar of Vishnu and is paired with Krishna, because in Maharashtra, really, you don't have Vaishnavism, you have Krishnaism. And Krishnaism is the other facet of Dattatreya. Dattatreya emphasis on love is needs to be highlighted and probed, because it goes beyond the rules and restrictions of dharma, thought in a narrow sense. So I think this gives to Datta the freedom and the creativity to be always unpredictable. And this unpredictability is the unpredictability of God or of Brahman himself. And this is what makes people so attracted to him, so that they can discover his presence even where you would not expect him to be. That is, in Tantrism, or in certain milieu of Tantrism, or in Sufism, or in context where you would not imagine Krishna or the Godhead to be present. Like, for instance, Mahipati shows very well, no, in the legends of Eknath. Eknath does not recognize the presence of Dattatreya or of his guru Janardana, and it instead is Janardana or Chandabodale that has to tell Eknath, look, the person we met was really Dattatreya, and you didn't, and you failed to recognize him. Well, that's very instructive. It has to do precisely, I think, with the Maharashtrian ethos, that one needs to go deeper, because things are always more complex than what they appear to be on the surface. And the third point is precisely that even in modern and contemporary Maharashtra, things are much more complex than what people or politicians or ideologues would like us to think. Things cannot be understood just dualistically, white or black. Things are always much more complex on the ground, and the history of religion and of the sampradayas of the Deccan demonstrate this to us. As Hemant Rajopadhye was saying very, very correctly, I think, we must not think even of the Datta Sampradaya in the singular, because the Datta Sampradaya must be thought in the plural, because as Hemant knows, there are so many subsects, so-called, of the Datta Sampradaya, various different branches of what we call Datta Sampradaya, that itself must be thought of in the plural, because there are so many different strands of it, so that the complexity grows. But we must be thankful for this complexity, because this is the richness and the vitality of what we call Hinduism, is its secret and its beauty. Because after all, ultimately, it all amounts to freedom, because that's the ultimate goal. Freedom for the individual, freedom for the society, freedom from samsara, and freedom from pain, suffering.
May I add briefly again a couple of points? Sorry if I'm interrupting a lot.
Sure, sure.
Another reason I think is the first question is about this Dattatreya's. Sorry, I forgot. That is how different traditions are, I guess, anchored in Dattatreya's imagery. Is that what that is?
Yes, that was one of the questions. Thank
So
you.
one strand perhaps which is not known or which is unexplored is the Shaiva nature of Dattatreya. I believe in the Western India, that is Gujarat, where Lakulisha school of Shaivism was quite prominent. Then here in Marathwada, that is Bid, Parbhani, Aurangabad, Solapur, and other districts, we have some Kapalika sects. We have some, we get to know that that was a heartland of Kapalikas. And there, even the case of Narasimha Saraswati, who was an Orthodox Brahmanical ascetic, who he stayed in this Jyotirlinga, Paravi Vajanath, for 12 years in Agyatavasa. Paravi Vajanath was a center of Kapalikas back then. And he stayed in a shrine that belonged to Bhavani, which is called Arogya Bhavani, again a tantric name. So he stayed in that cave near the temple of Arogya Bhavani, near to the center of Kapalikas. So even the Orthodox Brahmanism is not monolithic Orthodox Brahmanism that is manifested in the Dattātreya Saṃpradāya. It is again multifaceted, and this comes from what Professor Rigopoulos has referred to as the process of constant reconfiguration and renegotiation of ideas in the subcontinent. And Dattatreya is, perhaps when you say Dattatreya is appropriate or he is given the attribution of all these religions, it is not Dattatreya who takes these attributions. It is the tradition or the makers of tradition who give attributions to that particular deity. So tradition or society finds this need to reconfigure or renegotiate the realities, and perhaps because of these complex multicolored nature of Dattatreya, he plays a vital role. Well, he's like again. I guess, Tony, you have used the word catalytic agent, right? In one of your articles, he acts as a catalyst. I guess that's what you
Yes,
said.
because he's a catalyst of all this.
Yeah,
As you say, the appropriation is in the two is both ways, in the
yeah.
sense that it is the society that uses Datta as a vehicle of this appropriation, and it is Datta himself through his avatars that negotiates all these assimilations.
Right, and the definition of catalyst as per chemistry is the subject that goes transformation without itself undergoing the process. So Dattatreya does not undergo the process of creation of, say, Mahanubhava, or promulgation of Natha or Guru Charitra. He does not participate directly in that. He's just staying aloof, and people are doing that in his name.
He's
So
like a Sakshin.
Sakshin, yeah, exactly.
And please note that concerning Smarta Hinduism, there are all the famous legends. When Shankara dies, he goes into a cave and meets Dattatreya, and they are they are thought to be in perennial conversation on Advaita Vedanta even now, because they never came out of that cave.
Right. Thank you, sir. Let me also ask one question, then we can other questions. Maybe 20, 25 more minutes we can stay, because we said 5. Although I should not then simplify in any sense, but I'm afraid of doing that because there's so much that I've learned today. But to take the discussion I'm curious about the idea of avadhuta and love, which have been discussed here. There are certainly philosophical, if not direct, but precedents to some sort of Shaiva traditions in here. Now, I'm not much aware of the historical aspect, and it's also always difficult to define and to locate the historical traditions in that sense. But thinking in terms of pure ideas, Utpaladeva and Abhinavagupta have established the idea of Swatantriya very firmly in their metaphysics, the metaphysics of Swatantriya. And here we see this concept of Avadhuta being brought again, and as has been discussed and explained in many terms today. can we think? I'm trying to think and also there is another aspect of agama, the agamic tradition. There's the discussion about Vedic and non-Vedic tradition was there, but this sort of which you termed as antinomies, which were always present again and again, coming to surface in the society, are some sort of non. Not accepting the status quo, not accepting the standardization attitude of the society. Agamic tradition had also something like this, but it's not to relate certainly the historical lineage. But I'm trying to think about what is so particular about these traditions. Can we call it the and again calling or denoting is also has its own problem, but I'm trying to think in terms of metaphysics of freedom and love, which they have been so displaying it again and again, and to relate it with another aspect in North India of Kabir, which we all know. So there is a book called Agam and Kabir by Dr. Ramesh Chandra. He shows how Kabir's idea of his own metaphysics and how he conceives the whole structure of guru or teacher, or guru is also related to the idea of Ram, his idea of Ram, which is again non-dual understanding or not even qualified in that sense, and shows how it's related to the agamic tradition. And now in I think late 17th century, Agra had one major tradition of Kabir Panthis, which is still operative in the northern side, which the idea of Sat Sahib then emerged, and Kabir being the first principle of the whole world. And the similar idea of, I think there is a text called Sar Bachan, I'm forgetting that, but that tradition also has the ideas of, so there are levels of freedom in that sense. So Kabir's, the idea of Sar Bachan is that those who identify themselves as devotees or as, so he basically denotes all sorts of understandings of liberation, which is basically ritualistic liberation in a certain tradition. And then so Kabir goes on beyond all these levels, or they have this idea of Sat Loka. So the idea of Sat, in which the Kabir resides. Kabir is of course a metaphysical principle here. So now what can be, of course it's I'm trying to in some sense simplifying, but it should not be done. But what I'm wondering about is this: how would you comment on this? How can we think about this metaphysics of freedom and love in some sort of sustained manner, so that an inquiry bereft of the historical lineage or bereft of the geographical boundary can be conducted? Thank you.
If I can say a few words on this, I think it's a very important question and issue. I think concerning the first part of your question about Avadut, well, I think one needs to look very seriously into what are known today as the Sannyasa Upanishads. The Sannyasa Upanishads, and Patrick Olivelle has written beautiful things on sannyas, and has given beautiful also English translations of the Sannyasa Upanishads. There is the root, I think, for the theologies, for later theologies that developed in different ways theologically, of course, either the Datta Sampradaya or the relationship of asceticism and yoga with bhakti. But I think that is really the root, the in a way the source, and so also because the Sannyasa Upanishads are, some of them are very early texts. Most of them are medieval, but some of them are quite early, even before Christ. And so I think that is where I would go look into. And the second point concerning bhakti, I think one should never forget that, as I was saying, in Maharashtra, you have, alongside with Shivaism, you have this strong, intense Krishna bhakti. because Krishna Bhakti is at the core of both the Varkari and the Manubhavs. And even Datta, although he's Avadut and there is this element of yoga, still is rooted also in Bhakti. And think also of Jnandev's brother, Nivritti. Nivritti was a Nath Siddha, Nath Yog, in the lineage of the Navnath, of Goraknath, Matsyendranath. He was revered as the third Nath, in fact. But at the same time, was the brother of Jnandev, and he was, soaked in Bhakti. So this Krishna Bhakti and this element of pure love that will be developed theologically in the north and the south and in central India in many different ways, in Kashmiri Shaivism, etc., is at the root of the experience of the religion in Maharashtra. And third, you mentioned Kabir, and really, Kabir for me is really the key to understanding Shirdi Sai Baba. When Shirdi Sai Baba was asked, "What is your religion?" and he answered without any further ado, he said Kabir. And he told stories of Kabir, and he always said that his religion was Kabir. And this is very significant. The Kabir, of course, that was known in Maharashtra and in the Deccan in his times. But Kabir is the symbol of Nirguna Bhakti, is the symbol of going beyond the barriers of institutionalized religion, while at the same time being true to the fundamentals of all religions in India. So Kabir is really the key, for instance, I think, to understanding of figures that is so popular, like the Sai Baba of Shirdi, who is also revered as an avatar of Datta. So that really Kabir, you mentioned Kabir is very, very important, I think, in this discussion. And it is really important that you mentioned the figure of Kabir, because there is much to Kabir that goes along the same lines that we have mentioned about Avadut. And I think, and this is also brings together the north and the south in a way. Also via Namdev, no? Jnandev, Namdev, Kabir, they were also related. So that we sometimes fail to understand, I think, that it is impossible to think of India as north, center, south, because everything is interconnected. And even in old times, people traveled a lot, people moved a lot. And to think of exclusive patterns in the north, in the Deccan, or in the south, I think it's a mistake, because really, of course, each region has its own specific characteristics, like language, etc. But also at the same time, there is some very common denominators that you find all across the Indian subcontinent, be it in Varanasi, in the north, or in the south, or in Aurangabad, or whatever it may be, or in Pandharpur. So I think the Kabir connection is very, very important.
Thank you, Professor Antonio. Yes. I can't say if there are any other. Because I'm still trying to understand and studying what philosophical frameworks can be, as in these ideas can entail in terms
I
of
was
understanding
intending to jump in, but I was hesitating because I'm just, after listening to Tony, I think it is not appropriate to again, keep interrupting again and again. But I have a couple of points to make. One is the reference to the yatis from Vedas. When it comes to love, it comes with the package. It loves, and we also have hate. So Indra is said to have killed yatis and fed them to the wolves at some point in the 5th mandala, if I'm not wrong. And in the 6th, 7th mandala, the same Indra befriends with them. So this contradiction about the groups which are not practicing well, there's no practice in Rigveda as such, but those who are not perhaps respecting the authority of Indra, maybe, or following the path or the laws probably which may have set up by Indra, they are killed or they are taken assistant of. Then I also want to make another point is, Panini mentions of Kamboja Munda, Yavana Munda in Ashtadhyayi. So there are Mundas, that is uh, nomadic ascetics who are bald and traveling across subcontinent aimlessly. They are mentioned there. So perhaps the word Kamboja Munda refers to the Mundas, that is the ascetics who are probably originated from or staying in Kamboj, which is uh, at least for Paninian times, that Kamboj was the region where we have Kargil and Pooch and Rajouri, or that part of which is now in Pakistan. Some part of it is in Pakistan. Some of it is still in Kashmir, that is administered by India. Then the Yavana Mundas are Greek ascetics. So probably they are Indo-Greek people who may have adopted the local customs and were trying to I mean, they were practicing some form of shared faiths probably. So the Yavana Mundas, and so the probably the ascetic order that we have now may have influence from different ideas coming from probably the West, that is the Greeks, Indo-Greek cultural milieu probably. And then we should not forget Buddhism, Jainism, and Ajivikism and other religions, which has boosted the asceticism in India. So the notion of I have not read Agamas thoroughly. Very briefly, I have read, but uh, that we should not forget the asceticism that is nurtured, promoted by
Right,
these.
right. I think Jayanta Bhatta's Agamadambara is the it exemplifies all these things in that sense. The 10th century scene in the Kashmir, what was happening. Yeah. Thank you for the answer. Yeah.
If I can say one last
Please,
thing
please.
on the Kashmiri Shaivism, I'm
Yeah.
just reminded that a good friend of mine, a very good Italian scholar on Kashmiri Shaivism, is Raffaele Torella. And
Yeah.
Torella
Yeah.
is also a friend of Mrinal, and he has written a lot on Abhinavagupta and also Kashmiri Shaivism. And I don't know, many of his things have been translated into English, so they are readily available. But I'm sure that Mrinal, of course, he's a friend of Torella, and they know each other very well. And perhaps you might find some interesting issues on Shaivism or um, Abhinavagupta's philosophy,
Yeah.
even in Raffaele Torella's works.
Yeah. Thank you. I think Professor Turtle and Professor Rathi are my. It's like 80% homework in that sense. That's what I do. Yeah. Thank you. If we have other questions. Any more questions, please? Yes, Kayo, please go ahead.
Um, I have a slightly like more of a conceptual question. Although the discussion was, more about how concretely the tradition has unfolded in history, but I would like to know this one thing, which was like, which makes me curious, since Hemant was talking about the notion of self, which is so complex in Marathi religiosity. So, at the one hand, um, in the religious discourse, I'm not sure, I'm not read in this, so I don't know the details, I'm not thorough with it. But on the one hand, we have one notion of self, and when we read the hagiographies of the saints, there is a different notion of self which is emerging. So I wanted to know what is the notion of body in like Marathi religiosity, because usually, in Western context, when we read Western philosophers, once we admit body, we also admit the world. So what is this notion of body which is there in these saintly traditions, that is like, peculiar, or maybe it's hidden or not talked about? I just wanted to know that.
Will you begin, Tony?
Okay, sorry. Well, it is not easy to answer because the body, as you know, in Indian asceticism tends to be, in a way, put down or said to be less important, or even a prison to the soul. So that, in a way, the great saint tends to not identify himself with his or her body, and looks at the body in a way as something that is not he himself. But at the same time, having said this, the body becomes sanctified and holy and important because, nevertheless, it is the way by means or through which you are in this world. And after all, even if God himself takes a body, like Krishna, like the avatars, and so on and so forth, certainly you cannot limit his divinity or his avatara to the body, because that's maya, that would be an illusion. But still, if God himself has taken the pains to manifest himself in the world with a body, and as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I must come again and again for loka samgraha, for the welfare of the world. He says this repeatedly, chapter 3, verse 20, and also in other places of the Gita. So in the same way, you have this kind of dialectics, so that you are not to be identified with the body, and yet you need to be very careful with it, and care with and have care for not so much your own body, but the body of other people. So and it is here that love comes in and becomes important, and bhakti, and care and share for the other, and all the conception of seva, which is very, very important, even in the Bhagavad Gita. This notion of loka samgraha is at the core of the issue of taking care of the welfare of all people. So that in a way, you have this dialectics, I think, going on, that at the same time you must care and share and be, aware of the importance, although frailty, of the material world, of the body itself. And at the same time, this tendency to go beyond, to transcend name and form altogether. So you have constantly this pendulum, this dialectics of immanence and transcendence, which is also typical of the saints. Saints themselves are kind of always otherworldly, and yet they're constantly engaged in helping people, even in their very ordinary worldly concerns, like health, like progeny, like poverty or richness, their welfare, in other words. So they keep both to be important. And in fact, there is a very important and fundamental element in Dattātreya, which says that Dattātreya is the one who offers, who gives both bhukti and mukti. He cares both for bhoga and moksha. That is, he does not consider bhukti irrelevant. He considers it important, and he is the bestower of both bhukti and mukti.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Sorry. Yeah. Also, that your question, as I heard your question, the famous line by Tukaram, came to my mind. Sakala indriye nivavavi, muga paramarthachi vatadharavi. So the one who seeks paramartha, the one who seeks emancipation, should have all his indriyas, pacified or satisfied. So without having, the abstinence or the self mortification does not help you attain emancipation all the time. Or your vasanas, all your bhoga lalasas, the aspirations to have sensual pleasure or enjoyment should be satisfied. Then once your indriyas are tranquilized, you are free to attain moksha. One. Secondly, well, there is one pravrutti and nivrutti. So asceticism that briefly appears in Vedas. Even the Upanishadic gurus, Upanishadic rishis are, they are grihasthas, they have their wives. This notion of celibacy that comes from Jainism and Buddhism is adopted in broader Hindu pantheon. And then we have this notion of, female as Narakadwara or, whatnot. Many other ideas have come up. But then what is important is the Upanishad tells the, I guess, Kathopanishad, Nayam Atma Balahinena Labhya. So this Atma cannot be attained by the one who is Balahina. So even the Dhyana Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, when Naneshwara comments on that, he tells us that when Kundalini is, when Kundalini Jagruti happens, it is pushed upward with the help of your Virya. So that Balahinena Labhya, that Bala is your Oja, and it helps push that Kundalini upward. So at the time of that attainment, you need to have that physical power as well to get it pushed upward and then to reach that goal. So body is a tool for most of the Hindu or not Hindu, but precisely in Marathi. Again, that reminds me of Tukaram. Beautiful Abhanga, Sakala Chintamani Sharira, Zaridaya Ahankara Samola Asha. So he says, Sharira is Sakala Chintamani. Chintamani is wish fulfilling gem. So Sharira is wish fulfilling gem. It can give you bhoga, it can help you attain moksha. So the famous Sanskrit verse or line is that Sharira Madhyam Khalu Dharma Sadhanam. So Khalu Dharma, even the moksha cannot be attained without Sharira. So it depends on you how you optimize and utilize your Sharira.
Thank you. So there is no differentiation in like the different sexes of the body. So like I'm seeing like in the Mahanubhava tradition, there's also women who are part of the tradition, and it's not based off of the labor of unseen labor of women, but they are part of the passing the tradition forward. So in that sense, in Mahanubhava tradition, are those same Upanishadic ideas of the body being carried forward, or is it a different way? Just one short clarification.
I think there is both. I mean, in both the male and female orders of the Manubhavs is true what Hemant was saying, because this is very widespread all across Indian movements and sampradayas. So the body is a tool, and you must learn how to use it. You may be a male or you may be a female. That's secondary. But what needs to be done is you need to work on yourself in order to refine yourself. Think of the meaning of the word Sanskrita or samskara, which means to refine, because either through the language Sanskrit or through the rituals, the samskaras, etc., you refine yourself, and this refinement is what leads to having a fine health, a good body, welfare, and ultimately, as Hemant was saying, moksha.
Just a brief addition. That is why Dattatreya is conspicuous. I mean, he's indulged in all these material pleasure at some point, but he's the freedom that Professor Rigopoulos was referring to is that freedom. He's engaged in all these worldly and sensuous things,
but at the same time, he's detached, because he is the image of equanimity. As Krishna tells Arjuna, samatvam yoga uchyate. Samatvam, it's equanimity. And that's the very characteristic of Dattatreya, who is a Vairagya Murti. Dattatreya is Vairagya Murti.
Thank you. I'll let Shahzad ask the question of the last question.
Yeah, and maybe, last question, and then we can wrap up. I guess it's already 5.
My question is very simple. Like, you guys discussed the notion of the body within the framework of within the socio-political framework of the system. Uh, the main, like you explained how the body essentially becomes an instrument in this particular case. So uh, there are embodied mysticism that we find within frameworks such as that of Yukio Mishima, for example, Sun and Steel, or Vivekananda. There is a sort of cultivation of self-abnegation through work. But the main criticism that it often gets is that this sort of characterization of the body as a tool uh, sort of deals with a kind of an essentialization of the body to certain kinds of form. So it's sort of like in the case of Mishima, it's like the criticism is mostly towards the idea of body fascism. So you sort of work out. The body is just there, which is to be put in a certain modality of action and shaped up in a certain way. And that's what basically the relevance of body is essentially towards as this kind of a clay that we sort of work a particular kind of idea into, rather than body having its own natural agency in a certain way to determine what the modality of action itself should be. So, like, how would you sort of respond to that? So, in this particular case, the criticism would be that, like, body is important. Like, we can both agree that for liberation, the bodily needs and the needs of a nation and the needs of society are important. But they are important in a way that they themselves have their own agency. You can't just sort of they are not tools that you can just sort of direct to a particular way. They will themselves dictate things in certain political situations. Like for example, the discussion Hemant brought up the Maharashtra, like the ethics of the political situation of Maharashtra. Those are discussions that are developed through particular historical needs of the time, and that will forever remain in a certain way contingent to an extent that you cannot formalize a particular political action to it. So, in what ways will you sort of formulate this particular kind of ethics to sort of accommodate the agency of the body uh, towards soteriology?
My tentative answer to this, again, quoting from the Bhagavad Gita, is that one always needs to look at the intention that moves the action. That is, body is also, and most importantly, the mind, because it's through the mind that you use the body and that you practice embodiment. Now, what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I think it's crucial, and as you know, it's the basis of karma yoga. That is, in order to accommodate body and Atman, you always need to be very, very, very well aware of the intentions that determine your actions. And according to the great sages like Krishna and many, many gurus, the idea is that you should always act only having scrutinized what the intention behind the act that you plan to perform, if it is good or bad, and then decide what to do. So, and this is, I think, why in Indian culture, yoga and meditation and dhyana, dharana, samadhi are all so important, because in Krishna's application in the Bhagavad Gita, they're not thought only for ascetics or spiritual people. They are thought for the lay people, for everyday people, because the Bhagavad Gita was taught to is a universal text. It's not a Brahmin text is a teaching that is given by a prince to another prince, and it is meant to humanity as such. So this idea that in order to behave in the right way karmically, you need always to watch the intention that moves the action, I think is the basic presupposition for inscribing and situating all this fundamental issue that you brought up on body and embodiment. I think that the old chapters 3 to 4 and 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna gives this lesson to Arjuna, is still fundamental.
Thank you, sir.
I think we should wrap up now. Thank you so much, Professor Rigopoulos and Hemant sir. It was wonderful session, like both of the lectures. And although I wrote to Professor Christine and Fellows, but they couldn't do this time. But I hope the discussions or this engagement can be done again later around the end of the year when they find time or something, because the discussion in that sense, or the ideas and questions which we are discussing, are never ending, and there are important ideas which have come up. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me. It was a great honor for me to be part of this conversation. Also, the pleasure to see Hemant after many years. And so it was really a pleasure for me, and I thank you very much.
You're muted, sir. You're muted.
So I thank Himanshu again, and I apologize because perhaps no one here knows that we've been planning for this for entire year, I guess, and I've been postponing it. But better the delay is quite fruitful because we have Professor Rigopoulos with us, and
I think,
personally, I would like to thank you, Himanshu, that you took the suggestion. I mean, my seriously and invited Professor Rigopoulos, and thank you so much, Tony, for accepting this and for giving me the opportunity to share with you. Thank you so much.
All the best for your research, for your PhD, for the PhD of every one of you, and I'm sure we will have further occasions of being in conversation, and I really appreciate it a lot. And let's keep in touch also through Professor Marina Kaul, and it will be really very, very engaging to keep on the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And I hope this happens again when Professor Feldhaus and others join. But yeah, just to relate to what Hemant just said, because I think when I read the parts of Hindu last year, then I contacted him, and it was during his ill health, and we couldn't commit to at that point of time. But fortunately, it has happened in this way, and there's no comparison to that. I think that was right that we couldn't do that earlier. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, sir.
And thank you to our team. I think it's Ananya, Kavya, and me. We three are doing this thing.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you, Kavya. Thank you, Ananya. I guess Ananya was she's raised hand.
Yeah, but he's like behind the camera. Ananya, maybe you can, if you wish, you like to switch on the camera.
Yeah.
Hello. So he's working with Professor Jung, which you know, Professor. I think Professor Pravesh Jung, right?
Oh yeah.
He's working with him, and Kavya also. They both are his students. Yeah.
Pravesh taught me at Ferguson College. So perhaps I am one of those first students.
Oh.
Give my regards to him. Thank you so much. Thanks, Tony.
Glad to have you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hope to see you soon.
Bye, pranams. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.